Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide to Thaleia, the final 24-man of Endwalker. It's not much different in difficulty from Aglaia and Euphrosyne, so it should be no problem. But if you're struggling with anything in particular, this should help get you through. So use the timestamp, skip around, and let's get started. Upon entering, you'll come to a quick trash pull. The first few mobs just has some AoEs to avoid, but the second set is full of water elementals that explode on death, dealing damage to the entire alliance. Don't let that damage sneak up on people, so keep the party healthy and avoid any other AoEs until everything is dead. Now we're on to the first boss, Thaliak. This fight has a few tricky bits, but shouldn't be a problem. I apologize in advance, almost all of these pronunciations are probably incorrect. First is Tetraktus, which is just a raid wide with a bleed afterwards. Nothing too bad. Then there is Rheognosis, which summons a clone of Thaliak on the east or west side of the room. He'll then jump away, grow, and prepare to splash a wave across the room. This wave just knocks players back, so either knockback resist or go to the wall on the same side as the clone and just ride the wave. Right after that is Thlipsis, just a split damage AoE that everyone has to stack up for. Then there's left and right bank, which is basically just a half room AoE on whatever side of Thaliak the skill name says. Hydropsis then just drops spread AoEs on a bunch of players, so don't stack on top of each other. Immediately followed by that is Rhyton, which fires line AoEs at all three tanks. Spread and don't blast your teammates. Next up is Tetraktus. This changes the arena to a triangle shape and then attacks you with a bunch of triangles. Some might say it's a triangle strategy. Triangle-shaped ground AoEs appear and explode, so you just gotta use your eyes and dance around. Tetraktus Cosmos will spawn a tetrahedron that falls over, with all the falling walls becoming AoEs. Just a matter of standing near the corners of the tetrahedron as it falls. Even when there's two of them, just line up the corners of them and you'll find a safe spot near the wall. Once that's done, the boss will use Rheognosis again, though now it's Rheognosis Petrine. This calls Thaliak's clone to also summon two giant orbs that will wash across the arena when he does the knockback. These hit hard and give vulns, so just don't be on that side of the room while handling the knockback from the wave. And the final brand new mechanic is Heiroglyphika. This summons square AoEs that cover all but two squares in the room. Thaliak then channels a 90-degree rotation clockwise or counterclockwise, moving the safe spots over that far. You just need to figure out where the safe spots will be post-rotate and get there in advance. You're bound during the arena rotation, so you just need to get there before you're bound and you should be fine. After you see this the first time, it'll then be comboed with left or right bank for every subsequent one. So you want to try to find a safe spot that's on the safe side of the room from this, but if you can't, you actually have more than enough time to get to the other side after the rotation and the safe spot. That's really all there is to this fight. You're just going to see a bunch of repeats after this with the advanced versions, the double tetrahedrons during the triangle phase and so on and so forth. But you're all set now, so let's move on. After a brief run, you'll end up right at the second boss, Llymlaen. She is my favorite boss this tier, thanks to one particular mechanic. First up is Tempest, her room-wide AoE. You know the drill, I don't need to tell you. Seafoam Spiral is a donut AoE right after that, and Wind Rose is a point-blank AoE. Avoid and avoid. Then there's Navigator's Trident, which is a multifaceted attack. It starts with two back-to-back AoEs, one hitting the north or south side, and then the opposite side. Just dodge after the cast bar finishes. Llymlaen then hops to a side of the room and prepares a massive knockback. Get to the side of the AoE itself and avoid being knocked all the way into the water walls. Once this AoE executes, a massive hallway will form on the opposite side of the arena. For now, ignore it and dodge Llymlaen's next attack, either a Wind Rose or a Seafoam Spiral. Once she executes it, she will then channel an unavoidable knockback. Fortunately, the assist line on the ground will help you line up this knockback so you can go down the long hallway safely. Once you're at the end of the hallway, you'll be briefly stunned before the wave begins chasing behind you. You'll want to run back to Llymlaen while avoiding the bubbles that float across the hallway itself. These bubbles knock you up so they can cause the wall to catch up to you easily, which will then inflict a dot, just like the normal arena wall itself. If you take 0 damage from a bubble, they actually don't knock you up at all, so if you have shields on the move here, it helps a lot. Once back to Llymlaen, dodge left or right straight, which just hits the side of the room relative to her hitbox. Simple enough. Right after the straight attack is Deep Dive, which is just one split damage AoE, for now. This is followed by Torrential Trident, which drops 6 tridents in the arena. They will then explode in the order that they were dropped, so stand near the last one and dodge into the first one's explosion. After that, Llymlaen will drop some avoidable wind AoEs and some spread AoEs, nothing fancy there. She then transitions into a sort of second phase, which will just add some AoEs to most of her attack patterns for the remainder of the fight. She will cast Denizens of the Deep and summon Pericos and Thalaos. These two mostly do dive bombs through the room while she's using the attack she was already using. Basically, anytime you are avoiding something from Llymlaen, take a look around the arena and see if you see any water spouts coming out of the wall. That means a giant line AoE is going to fire out of it, and you want to get clear of it. And there should be 2 every single time. They also grant her access to God's Bane a little bit later in the fight, but that's just a big room-wide AoE. It's not any more threatening than Tempest was at the start. For her next Navigator's Trident, a few things are different. You will see the 2 ads dash through the arena when she goes to do the knockback section. So identify which side is safe from one of the dive bombs, and then dodge to the other side. You also need to make sure you're free of the perpendicular dive, but honestly, even if people get hit, it's not that big a deal. As for the hallway section during this time, it's actually a bit easier. Llymlaen will instead fire line AoEs down the hallway instead of spawning bubbles. She'll charge up 3 in a row before she starts using them at all. So you just need to remember the pattern that they were fired and dodge them 1, 2, 3 sequentially. At this point, the only other brand new addition is to Deep Dive, which is now a 3-hit split damage AoE instead of 1 hit. Ooh. Just a bit more healing and mit, so don't leave early. With that, she should be on repeat, doing the same mechanics with the dive bombs added in. So with that, let's move forward. After a ride through a quick wind current, you'll immediately come to the third boss, Oschon. This fight has some tricky visuals, but it's otherwise fairly simple. Sudden Downpour is a room-wide AoE to mitigate, and Arrow is a circular tank buster on all 3 tanks. The basics. Most of Oschon's attacks are him whipping around the arena to fire conal AoEs. The first is Trek Shot, which has him flip to the arrow location you see on the arena and fire his conal AoE from there instead. Just get to the side of the arrows. That's all you need to do. Same goes for his Reproduce plus Swinging Draw combo. He'll summon 1 or 2 clones depending on how far into the fight you are, and those just whip around the room and do conal AoEs from the arrow on the ground. Basically, you could ignore everything that's happening except for the arrows on the ground, and just get to the side of those and you'll be fine. When there's 2 clones during Reproduce, just ensure to stand directly between the 2 to avoid both of them. After the first couple of swinging draws will be Flinted Phone, which is a multi-hit split damage AoE. It hits 6 times, so make sure to take care of your party during that. This is followed by Soaring Minuet, a 270-degree conal AoE, which means you just need to stand directly behind him and you'll be fine. Now the final mechanic of this phase is Downhill, which places a bunch of random AoEs around the room before he performs a knockback. You can get knocked to one of the 2 safe corners from all these AoEs, or just use knockback resist and keep blasting. Now Oschon will repeat these attacks until he is brought under 50% HP, at which point he begins casting Lofty Peaks. This will hit the party multiple times before throwing them into the air. Upon landing, Oschon will transform into a giant form, regain all of his health, and blast the party with a big raid wide. Mitigate and heal, and you're on to the Phase 2. Oschon's attacks are much more threatening in this phase, but not much trickier than Phase 1. The first thing he'll do is a couple of Piton Pulls. This does giant knockback AoE centering around the 2 hooks locations in the arena. The corners that seem unscathed by the hooks are safe spots though, so quickly run to them and you'll be fine. Next is Altitude. This just does AoEs around the room, but they only flash on screen for a brief moment. Make sure you identify a safe spot during this time and get to it before the cast bar finishes. There's another Flinted Phone before a new attack, Wandering Shot. This fancy pattern fires arrows that turn into birds and then impact at the designated center point. The only thing that matters here is that final impact point. You can stand in the arrow's path, it doesn't even matter. So long as you stay away from the final impact, that is the only thing that will hurt you. The impact itself deals big damage and knocks players up, so don't do that. After the tank busters, Oschon uses Arrow Trail. This fires slow traveling line AoEs across the room while ground AoEs appear all over. Just get behind the arrow trails as they pass and avoid all the other hits and it's no problem. Also, there's going to be a Piton Pull right after that, so dodge. The final new mechanic is the return of Downhill, which now has a new pattern. Several arrow AoEs appear along the east and west wall, leaving just a few open spots. After that, Oschon will begin casting Wandering Volley. This forms a line AoE knockback that fires through the middle, as well as the impact point knockup from Wandering Shot. You'll want to ride that knockback into one of the safe spots along the wall, while standing on the opposite side of the room from that Wandering impact point. Do so, and everything falls into place nicely. Right after that is another Piton Pull, so be careful. At this point, the fight is on repeat, so just keep dodging and Oschon should fall pretty quickly. Before the final boss, you'll be set upon by several Angelos mobs. They have donut and cross AoEs, and pretty much all of them can be silenced. So tanks and fizz range, don't forget your roll actions and make life easy for everyone. Everyone who doesn't have an interrupt, except that they won't do that and avoid everything. Once you clear through the 2 trash packs, you'll come to the final boss, Llymlaen. This boss is just all 12 of the 12 at once, so if you remember all of the previous fights, this should be a breeze. At the start of the fight, the boss will open with Dawn of Time, which is just a generic room-wide AoE. Later, it will become Sands of Time, but I doubt many of you will see far enough into the fight to see that name change. Later on, they will have a tank buster on all 3 tanks called Sunbeam, but you'll see this maybe once or twice across the entire fight. The only actual mechanic for this phase is first, second, and third form. These attacks are just the boss preparing dashes for their next attack, each accompanied by either a left flank AoE, right flank AoE, or a donut AoE. You can tell which it is by looking at the hands that form around the boss themselves. If there's hands on the left, it means that at the end of the dash, they'll hit everything to the left of them. If it's on the right, everything to the right of them. And if it's just all hands all over, it'll be a donut AoE at the end of the dash. The effect only happens at the end of the dash, by the way, but the dash is so quick, you really won't have time to adjust to it if you're late in any way, so you kind of need to be ready to dodge it in advance. I recommend standing behind the boss and identify the safe spot of their hitbox, then stand on that side for each respective arrow. You'll have to remember for a handful of seconds which line is doing which mechanic, but it just takes a try or two to get used to doing. Once all 3 forms have been set, Llymlaen will use Quintessence and perform all 3 in quick succession. For donut AoEs, make sure to get to that final destination of the dash as soon as the previous AoE goes off, since the dash itself is quite fast. After the first time they use Sunbeam, Llymlaen will teleport to the center and cast the Whorl. This raid-wide AoE initiates the power of the 12, and you'll do 1 attack from each of the previous raid bosses. If the fight lasts long enough to do more than 1 Whorl, it's still going to use the exact same attacks, just in a completely different order. First up is Love's Light. This does the giant line AoEs from Menfina that occurs when the moons along the edge fill up. There's 4 in a row here, so just dodge them all one at a time. Next are Solar Fans from Azima. These fire line AoEs that become fans at the end of their travel on the initial cast. They'll then rotate several times before they explode in giant point-blank AoEs. Just stay 90 degrees from the final landing point and they're easy to avoid. Then it's Hydrostasis from Althic and Nemea. This is the triple knockback water AoEs, but the boss is going to speed up that third marker so that it's actually the first one. So stand next to the 3 at the start, then get knocked to 2, then get knocked to 1. I just take the first knockback and then knockback resist to make life easy. It's worth mentioning you can go off the arena and there's a bleed wall there, so you don't want that. Destructive Bolt is next, which is technically from Rheogr, but there it's a tank buster. Here it's a simple split damage AoE, so stack it up. Then there's Heiroglyphika from Thaliak. This works identically, but after it resolves, Llymlaen will perform Rheogr's Advent of the Eighth and Hand of the Destroyer. That's the giant portals that he punched through. These are half-room AoE, so it's very similar to just dodging left and right bank during the Thaliak encounter itself. Matron's Breath from Nafika comes next, and this is just you stand in the grass patch that matches the color of the AoEs as they appear. This is followed by Torrential Tridents from Llymlaen. Just stand on the 6th Trident and dodge into the first explosion, just like you did before. After another Destructive Bolt is Bayergot's Strike from, well, Bayergot. This does a knockback from the impact point and conal AoEs outward based on the pattern around the boss. Knockback resist does work, but you may wish to save that for the upcoming attack. I personally prefer to use it here. Right after the strike's impact will be Hallone's Thousand-Fold Thrust. This is aimed at one of Llymlaen's flanks, so just get to the safe side after doing the knockback. This is followed by As Above, So Below from Naldthal. This summons the 2 colored traveling AoEs. However, the only AoE that will actually occur is the one that matches the orbs floating around Llymlaen during the animation. So just stand in the opposite one and ride the knockback they use at the same time to end in a perfectly fine safe spot, or knockback resist. This is then followed by Soaring Minuet from Oschon, so get behind them once you get back to the boss. Finally, you have Eudaimon Eorzea, which hits the party 13 times back to back. So mit and heal through all of that, and bam, you're basically done with the fight. At this point, Phase 1 and the Whorl will occur on repeat, though Eudaimon Eorzea only happens once. There should be no problem anymore, so wrap it up, collect your loot. It's a usual minion, this time an Oschon minion, music sheets, triple triad cards, and whatever loot drops from your alliance chest as always. You also, of course, get your coin, which you can then combine with the Aglaia and Euphrosyne coins in Rad's at Hand in order to buy Tombstone upgrade materials. You do also get some other weekly rewards. You get the 2 clusters for materia, as well as the potential loot. So that's what the 3 out of 3 means for your weekly loot. I get that question every 24-man, so I figured I might as well mention it. But that's going to be a wrap for not only Thaleia, but also for Myths of the Realm. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And be on the lookout for all news and speculation for Dawntrail. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.